Imagine it's 1850. No engines, no electricity, just sheer human willpower against the Earth. In this explainer, we're jumping straight into a time machine, guided by cold, hard census data to experience a single, grueling day in the life of a 19th century farming family. We're stripping away all that cozy, romanticized nostalgia to look at the brutal, physical reality of survival.
Picture this. It's Mercer County, Pennsylvania, springtime, 1850. It is pitch black outside, and definitely bone-chillingly cold. The sun hasn't even thought about peeking over those western Pennsylvania hills yet, but a nearly 50-year-old farmer named Henry Carringer is already wide awake. There's no alarm clock beeping, no flicking on a bedside lamp, just the immediate, crushing weight of what literally has to get done today so his family can eat.
Which brings us to the big question we're tackling today. How on earth did a family conquer 80 acres of land way before the tractor was even invented? I mean, it's almost unimaginable to us now, right? To turn that much heavy, damp earth by hand and hoof, that takes a monumental, almost superhuman level of physical endurance. So how exactly did they pull it off? Let's get into it.
Dawn on the Carringer farm.
Before the sun is even up, Henry is tugging on his boots while the rest of his household is dead silent. The weight on his shoulders? It's immense. Specifically, 150 acres immense. That's the total size of the family plantation Henry inherited from his dad, Martin Carringer. Henry has literally spent his entire life clearing, cultivating, and fencing this ground. And of those 150 acres, about 80 desperately need to be plowed this spring. 80 acres of dark, heavy, stubborn spring earth. But here's the thing. Henry isn't tackling this solo. The Carringer plowing team consists of Henry, who's turning 50 this year, and his 3 oldest sons. We've got David Jackson, who's 21 and already a skilled carpenter, George, who's 17, and young Cornelius, who's just 15. The wild part here, these teenagers are stepping up to do a grown man's absolutely grueling work. On an 1850s farm, if you were old enough to walk behind a plow, you were old enough to work the fields. Turning the first furrow. The men step out into the cold morning air and head straight for the barn, where the horses are already stamping their feet. Now, you can't just hook up a horse and yell, "Giddy up." First, you have to meticulously inspect every inch of the leather harnesses. A single broken strap or a loose buckle that ruins the entire day's work. Henry specifically checks the collars and traces to make sure they fit perfectly. Why? Because a horse pulling a plow exerts tremendous, constant force. If a collar doesn't fit right, it'll rub a sore right into the animal's neck. And a sidelined horse means lost labor, which this family absolutely cannot afford. Finally, they hit up the heavy walking plow.
And we really need to be clear about what a walking plow actually is. We're talking about a massive, heavy frame with a cutting share and a mold board, controlled 100% by hand. A plow like this easily weighed around 100 pounds. There's no machinery to lift it out of the soil, and there is absolutely no seat. Henry and his boys are walking every single step behind this brutal contraption, wrestling it with their own raw muscle. To put that into perspective for you, just plowing a single acre meant walking about 8 miles. To finish their fields, they'll be walking hundreds of miles. In the mud.
The rhythm of hard labor. So once that first furrow is cut and the moldboard rolls that dark earth over, the novelty wears off really fast. The schedule is relentless. Within hours, backs are aching and shoulders are just on fire. Before sunrise, they're feeding and harnessing the team. Then it's just walk, turn, plow, turn, walk. By mid-morning, they take a brief pause. And now it's not a coffee break. It's just barely enough time to water the horses, check their shoulders for sores, and grab a quick bite. Then back to it. Walk, turn, plow. By noon, they head in for a massive farm-sourced meal. And the entire late afternoon, just continuous, brutal plowing under the rising heat of the sun, sweat completely soaking both the men and the horses. The contrast between farming then and farming now is just staggering. Today, modern farming often looks like sitting in a climate-controlled tractor cab, steering with one hand, maybe eating a store-bought sandwich. But back in the 1850s, Henry walked every single furrow. And whenever that plowshare struck a buried rock or a thick tree root, boom! That heavy, violent jolt shot directly up the handles and into Henry's hands and arms, nearly ripping the plow right out of his grip. He'd have to stop the team, dig out the stone by hand, and keep going. You know, there's an old saying, a farmer could not simply know how to operate a plow. He had to learn how the soil felt. And 15-year-old Cornelius was learning this in real time. He was literally learning to read the land's different personalities. recognizing a stubborn patch of clay, navigating a wet spot that could bog down the whole team, and sensing exactly when the horses were getting too fatigued. It was a deeply tactile, incredibly intuitive skill.
A true family enterprise. Now, while the men are out there enduring the physical punishment of the fields, there is a massive simultaneous effort happening back at the house just to keep everyone alive. The chores inside and around the homestead, they literally never stop. We're talking preparing huge meals to fuel the plowmen, caring for toddlers, tending the garden, feeding the chickens, and hauling incredibly heavy buckets of water. All of this heavy lifting largely fell on 23-year-old Eliza and the younger girls. And this is especially poignant because Henry's wife, Sarah, tragically passed away just 2 years prior, in April of 1848. So Eliza had to step up to keep the entire family functioning while 2-year-old toddler Harvey was running around. Every single person had to contribute or the farm would fail.
Sunset and a farmer's legacy. Finally, the light starts to fade over the Mercer County countryside. The exhausted men raise the 100-pound plow from the earth one last time, and the horses are turned toward home. Their boots are caked in mud, their hands are raw and blistered, but the earth is ready. But here's the kicker. The cycle never stops. Turning these 80 acres, that's just the brutal first step. Plowing is immediately followed by harrowing, then planting, cultivating, harvesting, and finally threshing. It's an endless cycle of agricultural survival. And tomorrow morning, long before the sun comes up, another field is waiting. So why put yourself through this? Well, you see Henry's motivation when he looks over his fields in the twilight. He is a 49-year-old widower, and he is solely responsible for providing for his 82-year-old mother, Molly, along with 10 children ranging in age from 2 all the way up to 23. This farm isn't just dirt to him. It is their inheritance, their security, and their literal future. Failure simply isn't an option when you have 12 mouths depending on the harvest.
The history behind the story. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually know all these vivid, specific details? Well, this entire reconstruction is built directly on the 1850 agricultural census. This was an incredibly detailed government record logging land acreage, livestock, machinery value, and crop production. In this very census, Henry Carringer was officially recorded as a farmer with $2,000 in real property. And the census shows his family makeup perfectly matching the sons, who were exactly the right age to pull that heavy plow. And the data from the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission backs this all up perfectly. You can clearly see Henry's property value of $2,000, but look at this. Sandy Creek Township had an average of about 2 horses per farm. That single data point highlights just how incredibly horse-powered and intensely labor-driven this specific township truly was in 1850. The historical data maps flawlessly onto the grueling day we just walked through.
So as modern technology continues to remove the sheer physical strain from our daily survival, we really have to ask ourselves, what deep connections to the land and to our own families have we lost along the way? Henry and his sons literally knew how the soil felt. They had to rely on each other for their very survival. It really makes you wonder about the untold stories of resilience hidden in your own family's history, doesn't it? Thank you so much for exploring this fascinating historical data with me today.